The moment began with what seemed like a routine day at the airport, the kind of day countless travelers experience while shuffling through terminals, checking departure boards, and preparing for long flights. Among them was a highly accomplished CEO, a man who had worked tirelessly to earn his success and had purchased a first-class ticket to enjoy a well-deserved journey in comfort. With his documents in hand and his reservation confirmed, he approached the boarding gate expecting a smooth process. But what unfolded instead was both unexpected and unsettling. The gate agent, without a clear explanation, questioned his eligibility for the seat that he had rightfully paid for. Despite presenting his ticket, the situation took a strange turn as the agent stood firm in denying him access to the first-class cabin. To many onlookers, it felt like more than a misunderstanding. It felt personal, raising silent questions about whether race had played a role in the decision. The CEO, dressed sharply and carrying himself with composure, did not immediately react with anger. Instead, he calmly presented his documents again, his demeanor reflecting both dignity and frustration. People standing in line began to notice the tension, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. What should have been a straightforward boarding procedure suddenly became charged with an uncomfortable energy. Passengers whispered to one another, puzzled by why someone with all the necessary proof of purchase was being challenged so aggressively. It was a small but powerful moment, one that showed how a single act of gatekeeping could ripple outward, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. This initial denial not only set the stage for everything that would follow, but also became a symbol of the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, barriers that successful individuals can still face. The atmosphere in the terminal was a mixture of anticipation and restlessness as passengers lined up and prepared to board. The announcement of the flight number over the loudspeaker brought a sense of routine order, the kind of rhythm travelers know well. Scanning tickets, adjusting luggage, and moving steadily toward the jet bridge. For the CEO, everything seemed set for a comfortable journey. He had chosen first class not only for convenience, but also because it symbolized the rewards of years of dedication and sacrifice. The boarding area was filled with people from different walks of life, families juggling children, business travelers with laptops in hand, and vacationers already brimming with excitement. Among them, the CEO blended in effortlessly, confident yet calm, his presence exuding the quiet assurance of someone accustomed to professionalism and respect. But within this ordinary setting, tension was quietly building as he stepped forward to present his boarding pass. The agent's hesitation was noticeable. The scanning beep didn't bring the usual smile or polite gesture. Instead, it sparked a pause. That brief silence felt heavier than it should have, as if the entire area sensed something was about to go wrong. The CEO's posture remained steady, but behind his composed expression was an awareness that this wasn't the smooth experience he expected. Meanwhile, other passengers continued to shuffle past, glancing curiously at the small delay that was beginning to hold up the line. The scene that should have been seamless began to fracture, as an ordinary process became the backdrop for a conflict that no one saw coming. This was the stage being set, a simple boarding gate, a ticket in hand, and an interaction that would soon spiral far beyond what anyone present could have imagined. As the CEO handed over his ticket, the moment that should have been routine turned sharply uncomfortable. The gate agent looked at the boarding pass, frowned, and asked him to step aside. At first, the request didn't seem too unusual. Occasional checks and verifications happened during boarding, but what followed quickly made the situation feel different. The agent began questioning whether the ticket was valid for first class, even though the details were clear and unmistakable. The CEO politely pointed to the seat number and the class printed on his boarding pass, confident that this was a misunderstanding that could be resolved in seconds. Instead, the agent's tone grew more rigid, insisting that there must be a mistake. The line behind him slowed, and curious eyes began to focus on the interaction. Passengers who had been preoccupied with phones, luggage, or children started to notice the rising tension. Some exchanged puzzled glances, silently asking themselves why a paying customer, neatly dressed and carrying the right documents, was being denied so firmly. The CEO remained calm, his voice steady as he explained once more that he had paid for his ticket in full. His demeanor reflected both professionalism and restraint. But there was also an unmistakable edge of frustration building beneath the surface. What should have been resolved with a quick scan and a polite "welcome aboard" instead dragged on, turning into an unnecessary standoff. Each second that passed amplified the awkwardness, and the unspoken question began to hang in the air. Was this simply human error, or was there something deeper at play? By now, the CEO's composure was being tested, and the gate area felt heavier, charged with the discomfort of watching someone face an obstacle that seemed to have no logical explanation. Passengers in the boarding line had grown restless, but now their curiosity shifted into something stronger: concern. Whispers moved through the crowd as more people realized that the man being stopped wasn't a passenger trying to sneak into the wrong seat or someone with missing documents. He was clearly prepared, holding a proper ticket and presenting everything he needed, yet still being denied access. The silence that had hung in the air turned into a low murmur, a ripple of voices questioning the scene before them. Families paused their conversations, business travelers lowered their phones, and eyes darted between the CEO and the gate agent. Some passengers began to shake their heads in disbelief. Others raised their eyebrows at one another, communicating with expressions alone. A woman in line leaned over to her companion and whispered, "Why are they giving him such a hard time? He has the ticket." It was a question many others were silently asking as well. The unfolding moment carried with it a sense of unfairness that people couldn't ignore. And as often happens in public settings, whispers moved through the crowd as more people realized that the man being stopped wasn't a passenger trying to sneak into the wrong seat or someone with missing documents. He was clearly prepared, holding a proper ticket and presenting everything he needed, yet still being denied access. The silence that had hung in the air turned into a low murmur, a ripple of voices questioning the scene before them. Families paused their conversations. Business travelers lowered their phones, and eyes darted between the CEO and the gate agent. Some passengers began to shake their heads in disbelief. Others raised their eyebrows at one another, communicating with expressions alone. A woman in line leaned over to her companion and whispered, "Why are they giving him such a hard time? He has the ticket." It was a question many others were silently asking as well. The unfolding moment carried with it a sense of unfairness that people couldn't ignore. And as often happens in public settings, the crowd's energy started to shape the situation. The CEO, standing tall and composed, was aware of the attention. He knew that every move he made was being observed. His calmness contrasted sharply with the gate agent's stubborn insistence, making the imbalance even more visible. The more passengers noticed, the harder it became for the airline staff to dismiss the growing perception that something wasn't right. What began as a private conflict between one traveler and one employee was no longer private at all. The audience had arrived, and with it came a silent but powerful pressure that would push the incident far beyond a simple misunderstanding. The CEO stood in place, ticket in hand, refusing to let frustration dictate his behavior. Years of navigating boardrooms and negotiations had taught him the value of composure, even when confronted with blatant unfairness. He looked the gate agent directly in the eye, his tone calm but unwavering. As he repeated what should have been obvious, his ticket was valid, his seat was paid for, and he had every right to board first class. His words weren't loud, but they carried authority, the kind that silences a room without the need to shout. He retrieved his phone and pulled up the email confirmation, showing the booking details and receipt that matched the boarding pass. The agent glanced at the screen, but remained unyielding, as if searching for a flaw that wasn't there. Around them, passengers leaned in, straining to hear his steady but firm responses. "Here is my ticket, here is my ID, here is the confirmation," he said, each word deliberate. It was a performance of patience under pressure, but it was also a subtle reminder he wasn't just another traveler to be brushed aside. What made the moment striking was his refusal to escalate emotionally, even though the circumstances clearly warranted anger. Instead of raising his voice, he raised the standard. His calm professionalism not only highlighted the absurdity of the denial, it also drew more people to his side. Several passengers began nodding in agreement, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. His posture and poise were proof that he wasn't going to back down or be intimidated. What he displayed in those minutes was more than self-control. It was a quiet but powerful form of resistance. The kind that forces everyone watching to reconsider who is truly in the wrong. The quiet firmness of the CEO's response should have ended the matter, but instead, it pushed the tension to a new level. When the gate agent continued to deny him entry, despite all the evidence he presented, the CEO calmly requested to speak with a supervisor. His voice was even, but the weight of his words carried the unmistakable message that he wasn't going to be dismissed. The request itself was ordinary. Passengers ask for higher authority all the time, but in this case, it shifted the entire atmosphere. Now, the situation wasn't just an exchange at a boarding gate. It was a challenge to the system and to how the airline handled its customers. The supervisor's arrival was slow, delayed by radio calls and hushed conversations behind the counter. In the meantime, the line of waiting passengers grew longer, stretching back toward the seating area. Parents began entertaining restless children, business travelers checked their watches, and the first murmurs of annoyance spread. What had started as a moment of quiet resistance was now beginning to inconvenience dozens of travelers, and frustration started to boil, not toward the CEO, but toward the airline staff who seemed unable to resolve a simple issue. When the supervisor finally appeared, the exchange became sharper. The CEO presented his documents once again, repeating the facts with precision and calm determination. But instead of quickly clearing the matter, the supervisor hesitated, adding to the growing sense of incompetence. Every minute of delay made the airline look more unprepared, and passengers could feel it. People shifted impatiently in line, some rolling their eyes at the gate staff, others muttering under their breath about discrimination and inefficiency. What should have taken seconds was now dragging into an ordeal, and the escalation was no longer just about a denied seat. It was about dignity, fairness, and accountability. As the minutes stretched on, the murmurs among passengers grew louder, evolving from quiet curiosity into open frustration. What had begun as a small delay now threatened to derail the boarding process entirely. People began voicing their opinions, not in whispered comments, but in audible expressions of outrage. Many first-class passengers, who had originally been focused on their own comfort, turned their attention to the unfolding drama. They watched as a man, clearly in the right, was being denied a service he had paid for, and empathy began to overtake their impatience. Some passengers confronted the gate agent directly, asking why the situation was taking so long and why the CEO was being treated unfairly. Others expressed support more subtly. Nods, murmurs of agreement, or gestures of solidarity. A few even threatened to forfeit their own seats in protest, a powerful demonstration that the collective energy of the passengers was no longer neutral. Cameras and phones appeared as travelers began recording, aware that this was a story worth capturing. The dynamic had shifted. What was once a personal dispute had become a public spectacle, and the airline's handling of the situation was now under intense scrutiny. The CEO's calm demeanor continued to stand out amidst the growing chaos. While passengers rallied around him, he maintained his professionalism, refusing to escalate anger or frustration. His presence, combined with the visible support of the crowd, amplified the pressure on airline staff. The murmurs of injustice had transformed into a chorus, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to ignore the situation. The gate agent and supervisor found themselves in an impossible position, as the passengers' outrage now carried the weight of moral judgment and social accountability. What was intended to be a routine boarding had evolved into a moment of public confrontation, one that would have lasting implications for the airline and everyone present. As the situation dragged on, the presence of smartphones turned what had been a contained dispute into something much larger. Passengers quietly began recording the interactions, capturing the gate agent's stubbornness and the CEO's calm persistence. Within minutes, snippets of video began circulating through social media platforms, and the incident rapidly gained attention beyond the terminal. What started as a private conflict between one traveler and the airline staff was now entering the public eye, creating a new layer of pressure that the airline could no longer ignore. The atmosphere in the terminal shifted dramatically. People who had previously been watching quietly now spoke openly, pointing out the inequity and demanding accountability. Some shared their recordings with friends, posting clips online in real time, ensuring that the story could not be contained. The crowd's energy became palpable. Every passenger who had felt a sense of injustice now felt emboldened to voice it. Even those who had initially remained neutral started expressing support, creating a collective force that amplified the CEO's stance. Meanwhile, the airline staff faced a mounting crisis. The more passengers recorded and shared the event, the greater the scrutiny and potential consequences. Supervisors whispered among themselves, realizing that a simple misunderstanding had escalated into a public relations nightmare. Boarding could not proceed smoothly with this level of attention, and the delay began to impact schedules, in-flight services, and staff coordination. The terminal had transformed into a scene of escalating tension and accountability, where social pressure, fairness, and public perception collided. This turning point highlighted the modern reality. In an age of instant recording and sharing, individual acts of injustice rarely remain private. The CEO's refusal to back down, combined with the vigilance of bystanders, had amplified a small confrontation into a crisis for the airline, one that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. By the time the videos began circulating and passengers' voices grew louder, the airline found itself in full-blown chaos. Boarding, which should have been a smooth and orderly process, ground to a halt. First-class passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while those still in line grew increasingly impatient. Staff scrambled to manage the crowd, but every attempt to regain control seemed only to escalate the tension. The terminal, once a scene of mundane travel routine, had transformed into a theater of public scrutiny, where every decision was being watched, recorded, and judged. Frustration spread quickly. Families with small children began complaining about delays. Business travelers worried about missed meetings, and casual passengers expressed irritation at the stalled boarding process. The gate area became crowded and noisy, a mix of murmurs, phone alerts, and conversations as passengers debated the fairness of the situation. Airline staff, meanwhile, attempted to navigate the mounting crisis. But with social media amplifying the moment in real time, any misstep could further inflame the situation. Every pause, every hesitated explanation from the gate agent or supervisor added to the perception of incompetence and mishandling. The CEO, still composed, remained at the center of the storm, his presence a focal point for both the crowd and the media attention that was quickly building online. Passengers rallied around him, their support making it impossible for airline staff to dismiss the incident as a minor misunderstanding. The growing chaos highlighted the cost of mishandling not only the individual passenger, but also the optics of the situation, in an era where a single video clip can go viral within minutes. What began as a denial of a seat had evolved into a systemic crisis, forcing the airline to confront the reality that one wrong decision, especially under public scrutiny, could disrupt operations, damage reputation, and ignite widespread outrage. Eventually, after nearly 45 minutes of tension, negotiation, and mounting pressure from passengers and the growing social media attention, the CEO was finally allowed to take his rightful seat in first class. The resolution was long overdue, and while it restored a sense of order on the plane, the incident had already left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Passengers who had witnessed the events firsthand shared stories and videos online, ensuring that the airline's mishandling of the situation reached a much wider audience. What should have been a routine flight had transformed into a moment that sparked national conversation about fairness, accountability, and the subtle barriers that even highly accomplished individuals can face. The aftermath extended beyond just public scrutiny. Internally, the airline faced questions about its training procedures, policies for handling disputes, and how frontline staff interact with customers, especially those who might be treated unfairly. For the passengers, the experience became a reminder of the power of collective observation and the importance of standing up when injustice occurs.